Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is October 28, 2025 at 4:30 p.m. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock. Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
see any changes? So I move we adopt the agenda as published.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move that we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign, the clerk to attest.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we will move on to Department Commissioner reports, and we'll continue with our destination downtown discussion. Nice to see you, Chris.
It's been so long. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you again for having us. I know that the good news is you will not be seeing us next month. So in honor of Thanksgiving, so we'll all give thanks for that. But again, appreciate it. We also wanted to have a discussion today that's I think a little bit lighter. There's been lots of good progress being made on some of the other things that we discussed. And so those are moving on in the background. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more about some of that stuff soon enough on the overlay and all that other things. But we wanted to talk about something fun today, a little bit different, a little bit more of the human side of downtown. And that was really as a reminder, for us, how do we take the baton that was passed to us from the first iteration of Destination Downtown and all the work that the city has done, Chamber as well, to continue to make downtown Meridian this amazing place? What's that next lap look like? And so we've already talked about the hard stuff, the parking, the land use, and we'll be talking about the transportation side of things in December. But this one is a little bit more about you, the human being. That's who it's for, right? And so that's what we're going to be discussing today. So we'll hit a little bit about some of these concepts and ultimately the recommendations, what people were in support of as we talked with residents at the different public events. We'll talk about these subjects related to, just framing it out, whether all the way from gateways through public art and so forth. So this won't take terribly long, but I want to make sure to do honor to this because this is, again, this is kind of more of a fun one. So gateway treatments, I'll start with that. So how do we know we're in downtown Meridian? Especially as we've gone through this journey together and the definition of downtown Meridian continues to shuffle around a little bit, but how do we know when we've arrived, so to speak? And so the notion of a gateway treatment is particularly one that is within, I just messed up my lineup there, but you get the idea. The point is we're trying to define those edges, north to south, right, east to west, pedestrian edges included as well on trail connections and things of that nature. And the point being is that we're trying to make sure when people do get here, they know that, yep, I'm in downtown, wherever we ultimately define that. But other things that give us, I think, an important piece of this is that, as you know, when you come as a driver, right, you go into an environment and you see a gateway and you say, hey, I've arrived at wherever I am. Hopefully, from a safety perspective, that helps too. It lets us know, okay, I should expect more people here. I expect different things to occur. Your downtown is not Cherry. It's not Highway 69, right? This is a different place, and therefore our behavior ought to change as well. We know there's going to be people coming in and out of on-street parking and small lots and shopping and all of the reasons. And so these gateways are important. So we defined the major gateway of north and south, and then welcoming into Old Town, and then Minor as the east and west. And so visually, it kind of looks like this. And so when we think about major gateway treatments, I'll go back a slide. That might be what you see in the top and middle something along those lines. It could be something that spans the street or something a little bit more significant that does say, hey, you're in this place, especially if you come off that freeway. And we know there is one that's out there now, but a bit of a different treatment. And then as it comes in from the north, into town from the north side. On the east-west, a little bit less traffic, not as busy. And so therefore, the treatment might be different, and it might be something that looks a little bit more like the bottom image here. And then when you get into pedestrian trails in the upper right, for example, that might be something yet altogether that's definitely going to be much more of a different scale. But the whole point is, this is the beginning of this journey of, okay, we're in downtown, welcome, and act accordingly and break out your wallet, shop, and have a good time, right? Lighting. So lighting is a big deal, and especially as we celebrate Halloween, and then soon enough we're going to be into the Christmas spirit and all that, and we're going to start to see lighting become more and more prominent. You already have it out here. I think your crews have already worked very hard and are putting up the seasonal lighting. But we want to think about lighting in a few different ways. Intersections and walkways, the projection and the opportunities for accent lighting, and then of course seasonal and holiday and even artistic. So if we kind of work this journey of these images, it kind of gives you a flavor of each of these types of potential lighting treatments. So we look in the upper right, for example, and that might be one of those that's a projection lighting. So it might be a public building, it may be some of your private partners. I hear that there might be a new building going in across the street. Who knows, right? Maybe we can get them to do something fun. But the point being is that it does elevate the prominence of that building, especially when it has really neat looking architecture and can change and so forth. So projection and accent lighting, intersection of walkways. So now we're looking at sort of the upper left, and that's an incredible treatment, right? But there's an idea that not only does it function as something that stimulates us emotionally and psychologically, but it also, again, is a CPTED principle. So if you know, CPTED is an acronym, crime prevention through environmental design. So that's a really important factor in a busy pedestrian-filled environment at dark hours, is to make sure that our lighting is right, not only, again, to kind of keep it interesting and provocative in a fun way, but also secure. And so lighting can help in that way. Seasonal and holiday lighting and artistic lighting, you kind of can see some of these different examples here. You've already got some of the things with regards to lighting in the trees, but over the head, candlelight lighting, that's another one of those that is really becoming more and more popular and a fun way to do it. And now they can be programmable. So it used to be where they're just white and that's all it was and see you later. But now it's a lot more interesting where you can change it and keep them up if you want and change with seasons or month to month or whatever you're trying to celebrate. So it's a lot more interesting that way. But lighting is an important factor. So in the report, you'll see there's a map that looks like this. It does not suggest that each of these are absolutes, of course, but more suggestive. But the green in those circles, that's where some of the more specific lighting treatment would be recommended. So for example, the parking lot out here, this is your public space, right? And as we know right now, particularly this time of year, lighting could be something that's more prominent within City Hall, links to our next block over, and eventually Festival Street concept. So it's putting all of these things together and our busy pedestrian intersections as well. So again, more suggestive, but maybe a good running head start there. Shade. So holy cow, this is growing all across the country. I can tell you without a doubt. Having worked in projects in Scottsdale, Arizona a couple years ago, I didn't realize misters were so dang popular, but they are. You're good luck getting your hair done that day because it's going to get blasted. I was in Galveston, Texas, where the humidity and heat is incredible as well. But shade continues to grow in popularity and in need. And so it is definitely present in our plan as well. And so there's a couple of different treatments and different ways to address this. We know street trees matter. As a practicing planner, I will tell you this: having researched this and been doing this for a couple of decades, my favorite tool in the planner toolbox, I know that I realize how nerdy that sounds, but it's true. Street trees is that tool because street trees do so much more than just provide shade. But they definitely can do that. And so placed in the right spot, they can do a lot of different things for shade as well as driver behavior, human comfort, and on and on and on. And so it's an important element. Year-round versus seasonal. So you might see, for example, in the middle right, an example, shade sails. That's going to be more seasonal. Those things can obviously be taken down. But in our public spaces, in our gathering spaces, if again on the festival street concept, that might be one of those where we have a higher expectation of people coming, enjoying outdoor dining, and all of the things that come along with it. And then, hey, want to go hog wild? Put a bunch of umbrellas over a street and see how people respond to that, right? But point being is that, again, there's different and creative ways with shades. And in terms of where, again, this isn't an exhaustive thing, it's more illustrative, but if you see in the far upper right, it's going to be in alignment with the direction of the sun, of course. It's going to be an effective tool. We don't want to pay for things that aren't going to be actually used. But in this instance, it's those streets that do face towards the west and towards the south to ensure maximum shade propagation. Sounds. Oh man, this is one that also has really come about a lot in the last several years. I got sent to a town in North Dakota a few years ago called the city of Cavalier. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Cavalier, North Dakota. It is in the middle of nowhere, 100%. But it also happens to be on a highway up to Canada. It's about 1,400 people. And it's on the Minnesota state line. What do they have? They have about 2.5 blocks, and I'm being generous, of a downtown environment. What do they have over the street? The lighting I showed, and a PA system playing music. And in that environment, this little small town, you legitimately feel different as you're simply going from one or to 2 or 3 blocks and having the lighting, but the music that's present. In this case, I recall walking and hearing the Everly Brothers was playing in my ear, and it just was neat. It was fun. In another community, the absolute opposite, Nashville. Maybe some of you have been to Nashville. That is obviously a hotbed of music. But what they have and what we do not have in all of Ada County, and what I would love to see in Meridian, is they have speakers built into their traffic cabinets. And in those traffic cabinets where there's traffic signals, as you're waiting to cross a street, there's music playing right here locally that can be heard. And it's just a fun way to try to celebrate place. And oh, by the way, it also changes pedestrian behavior, because you've all been in that situation where you've stood there and you've waited and waited and waited. And then I know, Councilman Overman, you're a former police officer. You've never done this, but the rest of us probably have, where we've crossed the street on a red light, maybe as a pedestrian, we're in a hurry. But that point of the sound it changes our mentality a little bit. That wait, that time standing on the corner isn't quite as long when we have something like that hits our brain. And so there's ways to get at sound and to just immediately energize an environment. And it's the same thing when you go to a place, for example, like the Village or the mall. You hear music, right? And we don't have that in places that we'd like to, particularly in downtown would be a wonderful place to do that. And other ways in the upper left, it's as you've seen in other places where you actually can activate. Kids might be more interested and they can pound around on this as a xylophone type of a treatment. And I know some of your parks have these types of things, but another way to just activate through sounds. Oh, the last one, I forgot to put this in, walkway sounds. It's another septed treatment in a particular street where you want to make sure people know, hey, stay away, or we want to make sure people are seen or heard. There's treatments, for example, where there's, it could be a laser, it could be radar, where it's actually, it's connected to a noise-making device. It could be a fun sound. And so every 50 feet, 100 feet, it'll pick something up and let people know, hey, there's somebody here. And so you'll see that, for example, I remember seeing this in an underpass in Denver under the freeway that takes you to a light rail station. It's all about crime prevention and making sure, like, if I can't see down there, but I hear something, I know someone's down in there. And it's a way to prevent people from, in this case, going into an environment that they don't want to. So other ways to get at sound. And again, on the sound thing, this is probably going to be one that more on that festival street, but again, on some of those key intersections and key locations like Generations Plaza. Public art, that might be looking familiar in the middle and the upper part. Art is definitely a huge part of a downtown, as you know, but there's different ways in which we can call something art, different ways to go at it. But I wanted to show you just a couple. Let me go back. So you know about murals. I don't have to hit that too hard. You know about other ways to enhance, but there's two ways to celebrate history here, even beyond murals. And it's the buildings that made Meridian and the people who made Meridian. But I'm going to focus on the people one. I love seeing cool ideas and calling them your own. If you've ever been to the community of Anacortes, Washington, which is up north of Seattle, it's where there's a big ferry that takes you up to Canada. In the lower right, this picture here is taken from Anacortes, and that website there, you can go and check this out for yourself. But you have the history walk, so it kind of gets to this where you're seeing an actual structure that something historic happened in Meridian. But this is celebrating the people who made Meridian, just like yourselves. And in Anacortes, what they've done is they've taken the images of people who've been instrumental over time, and they've popped them up in downtown in fun ways, and they've celebrated them there. It's not quite a caricature, but it's a little bit fun in that way. It's not a full-on, exact painting or what have you, but it's a fun way to celebrate the people of, in this case, Anacortes, Washington. And so just another thought there on what possibilities there may be for public art in Meridian. But ultimately, one more thing I wanted to show you, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this next time, but I wanted to show you in the lower left, the image, that sculpture there. That's on the inside of a roundabout. And I'm, for one, happy that the traffic engineering world has finally come around to saying, yeah, we could do that. And if you've been to Bend, Oregon, Bend has many, 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 many roundabouts, and every single one of them has something so unique in it that the Chamber of Commerce has a handout for you that when you visit Bend, Oregon, that if you go and you visit them all and you come back to the Chamber of Commerce building, I think they gave you a t-shirt or something like that. But the whole point is they want you to see these unique things and cool things and actually celebrate whatever it is that's being celebrated within the middle of that roundabout. So other ways that might be able to get at it, because you'll see me in December, as I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about this, but we did discuss the potential of neighborhood traffic circles, not full-fledged massive roundabouts, but more traffic circles that could be appropriate at a couple of few key locations in the neighborhood areas that are east and west of downtown as a way to enhance them. And again, kind of pull them into the fabric of downtown. So again, yet another way to address public art. And in this case, we just highlighted a few spots, but again, this is where it's appropriate and so forth. You can't see all those details. I meant to hide it from you on purpose like that. Just kidding. This is in the document. This is one of the implementation sections. And so we tried to capture everything I pretty much just said, but in a much more rigorous and technical way. And so it's trying to assign, here's who might lead up a campaign to make this happen, and how one might go about it, whether it's a policy issue, whether it's a mural campaign, whether it's a trial, working with ACHD saying, hey, let's get a speaker in there. Let's try this out. You guys have never done one before. Why not? It doesn't take much to do that. And so this is what this is attempting to do. Again, not every one of these is going to be accurate per se in terms of who the actual lead is. It might be you, it might be more. This is certainly a role. Much of this is a role for MDC in the chamber. But some things, especially on the policy side of things, if it touches that, would be certainly appropriate for the city to head up in some way or another. So fairly light, I told you. Well, December, we'll come back and we'll talk about these things. This is where we're getting into some of the transportation connections, future alignments and closing gaps, and then I'll give you a thorough overview of this 3rd Street and 2nd and Half Street comparison, just as a refresh, because I think it's important that you all get a good lay of the land of just making sure that we're either on the right course, or if there's some things we need to reconsider, then maybe we have that conversation. But that's not till December, well after Thanksgiving and the holiday season and spirit. So with that, I'm happy to talk about anything we discussed this evening in the human enhancement space. It's a lot of fun.
Okay. Thank you. Council questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Just 2 things I didn't see that I thought might warrant some attention. I think I talked about last time, like some cities like Copenhagen, other places kind of treat a lot of public spaces as an opportunity for families and children.
Yep.
So like public art that you could interact with, or even small climbing structures, just like things that are cool for families, I think is really, really important for us to think about. And then the other thing, I guess maybe it fits in this category, I'm not super sure, but we do have a lot of like parades and public events where they're, unfortunately, because of incidents that have happened in the news, we do need to worry about like mass casualty events and things like that. And I know some cities have like those, they're kind of like bollards that like appear from the street level that can like block streets off. Is that something that you guys have talked about? Are you open to talking about that just to enhance kind of our safety profile around like large public events?
I appreciate both of those. I'll go backward with regard to the baller discussion. That was not something that we actively discussed in Destination Downtown, but I do think that would be an appropriate conversation, particularly for the Festival Street concept as it moves forward. In our document, we do talk about the Festival Street, particularly as it's already been discussed on 2nd Street, but also taking it maybe beyond Pine up above, especially as potentially the Coal Valley redevelops and that maybe extends that way. So as those events take place in those corridors over time and it becomes ideally the successful place, that's certainly going to be a conversation I think worth having. I will tell you anecdotally, we worked on the 8th Street project in downtown Boise when it obviously had through traffic, and then when COVID hit, they shut everything down. So they asked us to look at that from an ADA perspective because it was kind of a nightmare and trying to figure out the dining part of it and the throughways. And they looked at some of those retractable, and they're not cheap. And they can malfunction once in a while. I think their objective is to ultimately get to that point, but at this point they are, removable. And there's different ways to get at it, but certainly it's something to keep our eye on. And then with respect to the family thing, I completely agree. And I know in the document, we talk a little bit about placemaking concepts and what that might look like and where those might be, those pocket park kind of opportunities, those real like Generations Plaza, obviously being a definition of one of those. And so certainly one of those, that's definitely, I think, game, especially if we do any kind of a revision. I will tell you, I think it's even in the document. I don't recall every image, but I think we inserted one that's, if you've been over to Mountain Home, is one of my favorite examples of a placemaking concept that was built there as they've gone into their downtown and totally overhauled downtown Mountain Home. If you've not been out there, what they've done, if you're not familiar with it, they took a container, a shipping container, and put it upright, carved out the front, put a slide on it. So it's a full play structure, put another one next to it on its side where they do vending out of it. They put in the cantilever lights, and then other things as part of it in a space that is a downtown space. So it's not very big. It's on like a quarter of a block or something like that. So those are those ways to activate spaces and make them even more interesting. So thank you for both points.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
Yeah, Chris, I'm kind of curious from your experience in other cities or what you've seen. It's just sort of the idea of all these different sort of ideas. Can they be implemented irregardless of other aspects? And the reason, what I'm trying to get at is, does there have to be sort of a common thing that weaves them together? Like, is the lighting need to be kind of working with the shade ideas, with the play structures? Does it all kind of have to weave together, or can you kind of just say, hey, we want to try this lighting stuff here, and it's going to be different over here, and we're going to do shade here, and it's going to be a little different here? Like, do you have to have a common theme that sort of stitches all these ideas together to make it sort of something that works? Or can you sort of say, hey, as long as we're doing something with shade or we're doing something with light, we're going to get that sort of desired goal? I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Taylor. So I would say a little bit of both. I think one of the benefits of doing all of the things that you're going to initiate is the factor of cost. So if you can buy things in bulk and more of them, it typically ends up being cheaper. So to whatever that is, if it's trees, if it's the lighting piece, whatever it is. So you might want to think about it that way. But I don't think that it has to all be done at once, or certainly even as a major package deal. It certainly can be done in stages and iterations. I definitely think that that's the case. I think that you want to have a good strategic vision, especially if you're going to go plant trees, for example. That's going to take, I would suggest we're going to do this block, this block, and potentially do them at one time as your crews are out there, or if you're paying a vendor, however that's done. I think that's the scalable part that would matter. But no, I think ultimately you can certainly do this, whether it's the concept one at a time, block by block, one at a time. Some things there's going to be a need to involve multiple blocks with, it depends on the topic. I'll give you an example in Elgin, Illinois. I was just there 3 months ago. I was talking with essentially Ashley's counterpart who runs their downtown, and on the lighting thing, I was blown away. Elgin, Illinois' downtown is really cool. And the lighting was actually bolted to the buildings. I'd never seen that before. Usually it's freestanding and tethered to poles. And she said because of what they get in their winds, they needed to do something a little more robust. I said, how long did that take you to do that? She said it took us I think she said it was about a year to convince all the owners on one block, right? They got it in. And then we walked to the next block, and there it was again. And I said, how long did this take you? She said, about 5 minutes. She goes, once that first block went in, everyone was kind of going, whoa, this is really cool. This is neat. We want that too. And it just has started to take off like wildfire.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Chris, always appreciate these presentations. Particularly the stuff around quality of life is always interesting. I think it's things that our residents often ask for, and you certainly propose some things I hadn't even thought of. So need to lean on your kind of global expertise.
Oh boy.
Lots of cities.
Okay.
You've seen cities that have done this well, and then I visited some cities where it hasn't been executed well.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you identifying like these are the agencies who should be the lead. The question, I guess, is two parts. Part one is it a case of that this type of, I'm going to call it infrastructure, lighting, sound, placemaking, wayfinding, quality of life stuff, does that happen first and then the commercial activity or residential activity follows? Or is it waiting for that piece to activate and then this, a jurisdiction reinforces? And my second question is, where it's done most successful, who's leading the funding of it? Is it a city? Is it private development? Is it business improvement districts? Help me understand what the right formula is and you've seen to make this be as successful as possible.
Yeah, great question. And so, Councilman Cavanagh, I'll tackle the first one you asked. My honest answer is that it really can be either way, which is that, again, I'll go back to Nashville. Everybody knows that city. It's been successful as can be. It's taken off like even more so though, even just in the last, 5 to 8 years. So they didn't necessarily need a whole lot of help in some of these ways, but they are continuing to evolve and continuing to make themselves even more successful. So in this instance, they had a successful downtown, invested in a few more features like this, but the industry itself and the downtown vibe also has, of course, been an appeal, and it's taken to the next level, right? But then certainly there's communities, and I think our neighbor Caldwell is one of them, frankly, where I remember being on a tour with people you all know who told me that they grew up there and there were bullet holes in the building when they grew up there. It's not like that now, right? And that took a lot of investment, which is now really paying off in so many different ways, not just from commercial vendors, but now you're seeing, living arrangement, building structures that are taking place. And of course, they're competing with you, right? And you're competing with them at certain times of the year. And so it really does matter what is the incentive here? What are we trying to do? For you all, your downtown has continued to grow. And each year, we were just talking about Oktoberfest and how the numbers have continued to go up and up and up. And so all that's great and a good sign. So what's that next level get to, right? And that is you're now starting to have those conversations more about residential and the 24-hour person that may be here, the SEPTED conversation. So these things probably do a little bit of both, right? They get to where that next iteration of Meridian is, but also augment the great things that are happening. In terms of cost, that's a trickier one for me to answer, to be honest with you. I don't know that I have a fabulous answer for you. There certainly are different ways to get at it. I don't know that the city's always the right one to get at it. I do agree with you that the city's role in terms of those policies that set the stage for success. We talked the very first one, parking. That's a pretty big piece of it, right? And how does parking fit with the enhancements that we're trying to do? What does that look like on a festival street, for example? Does it not? That's a conversation for you. So the policy side matters, but I do think the city in this instance does take the lead on things like, this is your building, right? That's your parking lot. So if we want to maybe begin a discussion on lighting and sound or whatever, it might be the kind of a thing where you set the tone. But I definitely would agree with you that this is precisely a role where an MDC and the chamber and the private sector and sponsors and the art community, all grants, all of that is a big lift for this. But ultimately, you're having to compete against that private sector, right? The village is a big competition for you. And you take one stroll through there and see what that vibe is like and understand the private sector's putting their money in some of these things, but you have an advantage where you have many, many blocks and many more vendors and the events that the good, hard people are working on and such. So you have a good running head start that they don't always have.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Willock.
Chris, just continuing with that thought, and again, the document in our packet says if downtown Meridian businesses are to compete with counterparts at the village, then ensuring downtown has similar features is important. If you start with a bare piece of dirt or a green field and say, here's our vision, it's pretty easy to build that vision. Can you do that? Can you make it similar when you have existing blocks? I mean, I'm just challenging similar features. When I first read that, it didn't quite jive with, okay, if I'm building it from the ground up, I can do it. But if I've got everything in place now and I'm building around it, how do I make it similar to something that's brand new?
Great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up because that might not have been the best way of writing that. It might have been where we were trying to express that some of the elements that you would see at the village are things we want to emulate in downtown, but not necessarily copy and paste. You can't. You don't have circuitous, cute little narrow streets where I was just there took my daughter there and her friends 2 weeks ago to celebrate her her birthday and seeing people do laps, very loud music and just doing their thing. But you're not going to necessarily have that same exact environment. And we're definitely not suggesting that you try to replicate that to a T. Not at all. Be you, right? Be the best downtown that you can. And frankly, I think you've got a much better setup moving forward because of, again, of just the dynamics that are here in downtown and multiple blocks and much more of the private sector energy that's still coming. They're kind of set, right? They're kind of what they're going to be, where you're still able to see more and more growth in positive ways. But lighting pieces, sound, all of the things that we discussed here, absolutely the art piece of it, the unique place structures and place making, those are absolutely things. They can't do that because they're done. They're pretty much done. Whereas you have lots of opportunities, whether it's in a parking lot in here, whether it's in a lot that's underdeveloped and maybe there's an agreement in place or future developments that can be assured and codified through here in these chambers, right? And the different enhancements that are in your code and maybe that bolsters those opportunities. So definitely lots of wonderful ways that downtown can be activated even farther, but in different ways, but with similar characteristics.
Councilman Overton.
This was a lot easier topic to talk about tonight and a lot more fun. Let me get that out there.
I'm still taking questions. What are you talking about?
I guess, you know, the only thing that I'm cautious about with this is I don't want to ever look like we're copying somebody else.
Correct.
But taking the time to identify what this means for Meridian. How do we do it our way? And what does our way look like? Because it's going to take a lot of different minds coming together to identify what that is. And how do we get all of the businesses in the chamber? How do we get a downtown business association? And how do we get all those groups energized to support it for public and private partnerships? And I have no problem with the city taking the lead. I mean, we took the lead as a city a long time ago with the first sign that went out there as you're coming in from the north. But it can't be something that the city carries.
Yep.
100%.
100%. And frankly, for me, like as I'm gonna throw where I live under the bus a little bit. So living in Boise, I have my office in downtown Boise. There's opportunities in Meridian to capitalize because there's not always the good things, and just because they're the big city, the center on the Grove, it's not that interesting. Frankly, just being real, you know, there's a couple of interesting things, but there's so much opportunity for Meridian to take the reins and say, you know what, we got this. We got this. We're making downtown the best downtown in the valley, and I think you can do that, right? In some ways, Caldwell has a downtown that maybe even is better than in parts of Boise, despite the fact that they're 1/5 of the population and fraction of the money, right? But as an experience, it's a different deal. I'm dying for someone to take this season right now, Halloween, and grow it into a month-long party of fun things with the lighting concepts and the different ways that take it to the next. Everybody does Christmas, to your point. We don't want to be the next, you know, if you want to do Christmas, but how do you set yourself apart? There's certain things that other cities are not doing. Bingo.
Hear that, Sean? Oktoberfest, the trunk or treat. There you go.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
given that my birthday is on Halloween, I think that's a great idea. And we could just celebrate my birthday all month.
Well, happy early birthday. You can have as much candy as you want.
I'm going to kind of dovetail off of Councilman Overton's question a little bit and kind of what Councilman Kavanaugh was talking about with, you know, who's taking the lead, who's driving it, you know, whose voices are really important here. You know, those of us up here, I think we understand our role is in some respects, you know, policy funding, you know, setting the stage, but then there's MDC and then there's our business community. So I might even ask Sean if he'd be curious if he could come up. What does the chamber think about this? What are some of your thoughts? And if you don't mind coming up and sharing a little bit about that, but I'm kind of curious your interactions and some of your ideas as it comes to some of these ideas.
Me too.
You gotta wait till I get to the,
Share a few comments, if you don't mind. Please, jump on. No, all of you've asked great questions, and I've been with the chamber almost 6 years. I've lived here in Meridian for 16 years, and we definitely saw our downtown slow down in development when the village came. Our downtown lost a little of the focus, and communities around us like Boise, Caldwell, even Eagle to a certain point, really saw their downtown bring a lot more business into it. And just in the time that I've been with the chamber and the things that we've been talking about in our downtown, while the chamber represents the business community as a whole, we see our downtown is that place that we have a lot of opportunity to create space, to create activities, to bring people. When we did the Oktoberfest the first year, 4 years ago, I can tell you the number one thing, the number one comment that we got from people was, I didn't know Meridian had a downtown. I didn't know it was this quaint, that it was this nice, and that we could come down here for activities. So we really built on that. We tried to bring more people down. Oktoberfest, we just completed it a month ago, the 4th year, and I was just sharing with Councilman Cavanagh beforehand, we got the Placer AI data last week, and there was 14,900 people in downtown Meridian between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. That was just the time frame that we asked them to report on. And that wasn't all at once, that was throughout the 12-hour period, but it's because we created an activity. We brought other businesses in. We brought 80 vendors in. We brought food vendors, general vendors. We brought stages in to put in downtown, and then we marketed for people to come downtown. And they came. They spent money. All of our vendors had beat previous year's revenue that they had tracked, and they just keep asking us to do more. This year, we added another event. The car show. We did a car show in September, and despite the rain, we still had 136 cars show up and activate the downtown. We had well over 1,500 people in the downtown just for that car show from 10 to 3 o'clock. And the car show attendees were like, you have to do this again. We're going to tell more people, be prepared for double the cars next year. So it is all about activation. Everything that we've studied, everything that we've looked at, if we can have that space that we can easily activate, like the Indian Creek Plaza. I was just down there 2 weeks ago, and it was so easy just to go up on their fixed stage and do an event and things. It costs. There's a lot of cost to bringing in staging and things like that. There's a lot of cost to road closure, that if there was things that we could do in conjunction with the city, ACHD or other partners to make that easier, whether it be temporary balusters that are brought in or something like that, we could activate downtown much more frequently. And then the things that they were talking about, the lighting, the sound, the shade trees, the art, that just becomes something that makes it more appealing for people to be downtown. But it's going to take the activation. It's going to take bringing concerts, bringing other activities, creating a place for people to want to come into our downtown. And then that's going to draw businesses. You're going to find more businesses that say, oh, downtown's worth being down there because there is 200 plus events a year. I'm going to spend the money to be in a downtown business because they've created the foot traffic. It's what the village has done. They created a space where people are coming and they get top dollar for their retail places because they've created space.
Mr. Mayor, just
Happy to answer any questions.
quick
Councilman
follow-up.
Taylor.
So you kind of leading into a question I had in my mind, which you answer first, and then Chris will be curious yours, which is a lot of what we saw tonight or reading in this report is about what it feels like, how enjoyable you can make the space, shade, other things. But then how do you get people to come, right? So you guys can host events and that's nice. But what's the next evolution of how do you get people to come? And we've talked about a festival street and this concept before. Be kind of curious to know, obviously I know you support it, but how do you envision sort of that gathering space that's devoted towards more of an actual gathering space instead of blocking off the streets and throwing up some street vendors. You know, what is the business community's ideal sort of festival street layout? How do you take advantage of that to attract businesses? Not just, I mean, street vendors are important, but you know, more brick and mortar type of businesses, other activity off, people who want to bring an office space and lease down here. What's your sort of perspective on that, representing the business community? And Chris, I'd be curious your comments as well.
So, from my perspective, marketing, once you start doing something, people will start looking at the calendar, what you got produced and things like that. I can tell you, over the 4 years in Oktoberfest marketing, we've actually rolled back our marketing spend. We've created an event that has created, that people know about. Word of mouth is getting around. They're coming down. You know, we've shifted from, you know, heavy radio advertising and print media advertising to probably more just social media of saying, hey, Oktoberfest has come back around. You've got great pictures to share and things like that, and people want to be a part of it. As far as the businesses, one of the things, and Councilman Little Roberts can probably attest to this because she was in my role previously. We've had a sea change in some of the downtown businesses. The downtown businesses used to be objectionable to closing the streets and bringing in vendors and things like that. What we've shown them is that by doing things like that, we're bringing additional foot traffic, and you've got to capitalize on it. Do we still have a few outliers that are, you know, would rather see, you know, their customer be able to park right in front of their business? Yes, but the foot traffic that we're creating, the awareness and things, that is invaluable marketing for those downtown businesses to be a part of that. So hopefully I gave you an answer to my portion of it.
So my answer is going to be, this is precisely that question is precisely why the other parts of this document are important. It's why that parking should be as organized as we can be. Don't need to put a parking garage, but if we can organize it and make it easy, park once, you know, do your thing, and make it as transparent and simple as can be, enforceable, all the things we talked about, you know, that's a piece of it. It's why the overlay and the design standards are so important, because it's not just about attracting the people to come here. It's also about trying to make this place in the downtown also a livable place where people want to actually live and spend even more time. But the design standards are a piece of it. It's ensuring that the facades and the entry points are oriented towards the street in the right direction. It's not just a big parking area out in front, for example, right? All those little details in the overlay matter, and it gets to the point that you're getting to, is all the ways and reasons why people want to be in the place. And it's special. It's next December, this coming December, when I come back. It's also the reason why we talk about the connection piece. To make it easier, if we do want people to come into downtown, how do we get in and out as easily as we can? Whether it's by car or by foot or bike even, or bus, and eventually the rail corridor and the trail that you're building along the rail corridor. But having additional connections matters for the ability to get in and out and make it an easy experience. So that's why all these puzzle pieces, in addition to what we talked about tonight, are important to the full vision of what this destination downtown is trying to achieve. So that when we have the events, right, they're even more successful in all of those different ways.
So I got 3 items for you, Chris. We'll try to go through them pretty quick. First one, the gateway features. Meridian Road. Yes, lighting was first put on. That's like one of the first projects that was done through MDC, was when they put all the historical lighting on that road. But otherwise, it's a large road where you can't get any ambiance in its current structure. And I don't want to say it's not part of downtown, but they put the road in to get people to bypass downtown so that downtown could be the walkable space. So at least in where they've identified entryway structures, we got one on Meridian, we got one on Main, and we got one even up at Franklin. And I don't know that Franklin or Main or Meridian Road locations really signify you're in the downtown currently for what you are trying to convey. So talk to me about why would you put those there if you were to put them up tomorrow?
Right.
50 years, 40 years, 20 years, 10 years, it might be different, but, or do we need to put some emphasis on Meridian Road to change what Meridian Road feels like, even if it was a boulevard with trees in the middle to try to like slow it down and change its feel for it to feel like downtown, because it doesn't feel like downtown. That's really where both those areas don't feel like what our downtown is, where those gateway monuments are proposed, at least in the plan.
And Mayor Simison, you're illustrating the point that we've had in this chamber and we had in the couple of years of putting this document together, which is where is downtown? Because for our task for destination downtown was freeway, I'm going to say Fairview, Cherry, but even a little bit farther. So for our perspective or point, that was the boundary of what downtown was. But to your point, it's maybe more defined as what your code would refer to and what we've been discussing with the overlay of Old Town. But yet there's also objectives within the comprehensive plan and the previous documents that kind of say, hey, downtown we want it to grow. We want it to stretch, especially as we go towards south a little bit and up towards north. It's why we want to have some of the land use discussions up around Cherry and Main and Meridian Road, for example, is okay, this is part of downtown now. And so that's what our general thinking was and what we were hearing from the public about where their thoughts are, where is downtown, where's this old town? And it is a tricky one, 100%. So if the ultimate landing place for where these circles on this map are to change, I think that's fair game. At this point, that was our best take of saying, hey, these major intersections, the investment that's going to be going in to Fairview, for example, and other corridors, that's where we're thinking. With the potential for the Speedway, we don't know what that's going to look like. There was another possibility there of saying, hey, we're pretty much right in downtown now, or you're just about there. So that was our general line of thinking.
Second one, you alluded to it a little bit, and well, the plan alluded to it. You didn't really talk about it, but I guess Generations Plaza, there's a space that it was mentioned here might need a sprucing up. Is that the area that is a big enough area to try to make it be the activation point? Because people have tried to activate it over the years in different ways.
Right.
And I think it's activated by the restaurants on the edges, but the plaza itself really doesn't get a lot of activation from our perspective. So is that an easy place for the city to start, since it is our property? It's kind of like City Hall property. And if so, what would that look like in your mind tomorrow as an easy way to spruce it up?
That's a great question, Mayor. And I would say our effort was not intended to get that granular in terms of design treatments on a parcel by parcel basis to that point. I think you're right that the Generations Plaza might be the most opportune site because people are familiar with it and it is something that, has ownership of. But are there other competing spots that might make sense too? I don't, off the top of my head, I'm not going to be, I'm not able to answer that. But if I were to do two things, I would say that I would really get into the music and lighting. I would lean on that. I would activate that space by making it interesting, by getting in here, first and foremost. So those are the two things on generation, because those are also two ways that they're not as heavy on the bank account, right? They're not going to be some major transformational thing that you're kind of rolling the dice on. We know that lighting is a relatively simple way, and with the programmable stuff immediately will make a big difference there, especially this time of year, when it's darker hours. And the music side, that's also fairly easy. But the other space is this one out here. And I know that it's a parking area, but directly out front is not. And so there's another one of those public spaces that you have a bit of a canvas. There's a great water feature, but you have the bathrooms and stuff. So that might be a competing area that might be a trial and error with some of these things.
And you just touched on my third piece.
Okay.
One thing that wasn't talked about in here was a water feature, and I'd be remiss. I saw Mayor Tammy last Friday. She very specifically asked where the water feature is in the downtown conversation. But But in terms of activation, I mean, obviously we don't have a river or a creek that runs through it. Where do you see water coming into any consideration for what you want to create in downtown or a public space?
Yeah, another great question. And my answer to that would be, and this is a bit separate from the document since it's not necessarily in there. I think water features are fantastic and wonderful. I know they're expensive, and I know they're expensive to maintain because they leak and they hit pumps and all of that kind of stuff. So that becomes part of the calculation, especially in summer. It starts to dry up too, but you know, I'm not going to sit here. I don't think I have a ready-made answer for that. I think that water features are great. I think water features can certainly enhance certain locations where they're appropriate. But given the cost of things and the maintenance, I think that's a deeper discussion, frankly, that probably ought to be had, especially amongst MDC and the city.
Okay, thank you for indulging me. Councilwoman Schrader.
Thank you. Just a process question. I've been out for a couple weeks, so I'm still getting caught up, but we're having these meetings every month. I think you're getting really good feedback from us. We're exchanging ideas. Does it make sense sometime like early in 2026 or maybe in our next meeting to come back to us with like, hey, these are some things we're thinking about changing in the plan, or these are some tweaks that we're considering just in response to feedback from the city? I was just kind of curious how you're thinking about that as we move forward.
That's a great question, and thank you, Councilman Strader. So I think this point, the big momentum that we have at this point is the overlay district. And I know that staff is working towards that and going through and documenting the types of things that they agree with, things that don't necessarily agree with, and ultimately that's going to be in front of you at some point so that they're moving forward and making progress on that front. So the question maybe is, do we engage in that and then the bulk of the document when the time is right for any and all updates that kind of go in as a result of that overlay conversation? Or do we start to piecemeal this as it moves forward? I think that's a question that would need to be discussed, you know, I think with Ashley and myself. She's technically my client, so to speak. So we need to make sure we're on the same page about that. I don't want to speak out of turn. But I do think it's important that we continue to make that document better, but the timing of when it is. And then ultimately, how do we ensure we capture all of your general comments and that there's alignment within them as much as possible? So I think that's part of it. But I do agree that it's probably getting close to the point where we start getting things on paper and modifying where it needs to be modified to strengthen it.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. And your mic. Ooh.
Two. Oh, there we go. If I remember right, Caldwell did a business improvement district to get Indian Creek Plaza and all of that kicked off. Is that something that we would potentially need to look at? If I remember right, it took them a fairly long time to get the businesses to buy in, and Sean's absolutely right. We had some that were just like, few of them are still around that just were absolutely not going to budge for anything along there. And all of this is wonderful. I'm super excited. I've done a lot of, in past on like walkable cities and things like that. And so, but I also know that there can be a lot of back work before something like this can even start, even though it sounds like you've come up with some great things like lighting and things that can be changed quicker.
Thank you for the question. And so you have in place an urban renewal district as we speak, and there's mechanisms and opportunities within the URD, separate conversation. But nevertheless, there is a bit of a mechanism there, but maybe not necessarily all of the funding can come from that particular tool. So would a BID be appropriate? That's another question that has to be, kicked around, because frankly, that's a tax, let's be honest, right? That's a funding mechanism that's specific to a geography, but going toward the improvement that is agreed upon. So that's a discussion that certainly would need to be coming through this board or this commission and council. Let me get the third one right, because of the dollars and cents that comes from it. But I do agree that at some point there may be a need to have do we have a dedicated funding source to this, or do we continue to do and go about this as it is? Because you could accelerate the pace of the delivery of some of these things, with a dedicated source. But if that's not comfortable, especially just, moving parts of cost of living and business costs and stuff like that, then maybe we're more comfortable with the pace that we're in. I will say, maybe some of you have been to Joseph, Oregon, up by Wallowa Lake. They have an art district. So it's the same kind of a thing in terms of an actual taxing district, but the amount of art that's in there and all of the different ways that they spend those funds, it's amazing to see. It really is. It's quite overwhelming in some respects. It's just so prominent, but that's a decision that needs to be, I think, had probably later on. But
Chris, I'm gonna ask Curtis to come on up and maybe piggyback on this, because this is something that we have been having conversations and exploring with our business community. And I think some of it is, expectations of what they want or are willing to pay for and cost. So you don't have to go into just give a brief overview of maybe where you think things are with your conversations so far.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My name's Curtis Calder. I'm Economic Development Administrator. And when I came on board a year or so ago, the mayor had asked me to start the exploration of a business improvement district, anticipating the oldest URD expiring next year. And so we have engaged probably about 50 property owners in the central downtown core and had pretty lengthy conversations with them and explained what, number one, a business improvement district is, because there's always a lot of confusion with regard to what it is versus a urban renewal district. So a lot of it was education. The feedback we've received, and we've kind of put this together in a draft report. We haven't finished it yet. But the feedback we got was very positive, actually. So it might have to do with a lot of the different folks changing throughout the last decade or so down there. But we feel like, just anecdotally, it's a petition-driven process. It's not something we necessarily control once they start the petition process, but we feel like there would be enough support to at least get it through the petition if it were to go that far. We think that it's not 100% support, and we have visited with both, with Caldwell, Nampa, Boise, Coeur d'Alene, their BIDs, to see how they were established, how they garnered public support. Each community did it a little bit differently. But we would say that in Caldwell's example, they, to this day, still do not have full support. And they said if we were to go through that process, to shoot for like 80%, 75, 80%, because we'll spend a lot of time on 5 or 10% that are opposed to it, even once it's established. So they spend a lot of their time still dealing with people that aren't very happy that they have a BID. So I don't know if we could get to that level of support out of the gate, but I think the one thing they want to see, or before they would be comfortable signing on, is wanting to know what the money would be used for. They want a plan. They want to know what the value is of having a BID. And then the other question we've gotten a lot is, why would we not think of reestablishing the URD again once it expires? So that question's out there. I think there's folks that maybe don't want to see another URD, but it is another tool in the toolbox. And so a lot of these communities are layering both. They have a URD and a BID, and they're able to generate quite a bit of income to do some of the improvements that the businesses and the property owners would like to see. So that's kind of a quick summary.
A lot more to come, but that basic question, is it a person? Is it events? Is it, taking care of things like this that cost money from lighting and art and everything else? I think those will be the questions that they'll want to know. And I think so what this conversation is will help drive that conversation as well. So they can say this is a plan that they may or may not be interested in supporting.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
a quick question, Curtis. Does a BID have an expiration date? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I mean, how's it, or is it in perpetuity?
Well, they are definitely structured differently per whatever, I think it's through resolution of a city council when it's established. So I don't think there's anything that says prevents you from putting a sunset date on it. But the ones that we've looked at do not have sunsets. So I would assume that's something we wouldn't want to limit ourselves on, especially if the property owners are asking for it. Because again, it's not pushed down from us, it's pushed up from the property owners and or businesses in the case of a business improvement district.
Thank you. Appreciate that update.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any additional questions at this time? Comments? Okay, take next month off.
See you in December.
See you in December. Thank you. Okay. Councilman Cavanagh.
Sure. The movie go into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 742061F.
Second.
Have a motion second to go in executive session. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh. Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strater.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. We'll go into executive session.